Hi there, my name's Arya. I thought planning my wedding would be the happiest time of my life. Instead, my parents sent me an envelope. No hug, no call, just 4 words. Deal with it. You chose this life. They didn't just miss my wedding. They posted about family values. At a BBQ I wasn't invited to. They opened credit cards under my name. And when I fought back, they called me crazy behind my back. Was it the wedding that broke us? Or had they been cutting me out long before I ever said I do? I had spent months planning my wedding, not some extravagant affair with golden chandeliers and a 500-person guest list, but a simple, heartfelt ceremony at a cozy vineyard just outside Austin, Texas. Daniel and I had scraped together every dollar ourselves. No loans, no family handouts. Just two people building a life together from scratch. Still, somewhere deep down, I had clung to a fragile hope. Maybe my family would surprise me. Maybe they'd show up with smiles and hugs, proud that I had made it, that I had found someone good. I knew better, of course, but knowing and hoping aren't always the same thing. 6 months before the wedding, my parents Darlene and Wendell started dropping hints thicker than Texas humidity in July. Flying out is so expensive, Mom sighed one evening over the phone. And your father's got nothing decent to wear for something fancy like that. Dad chimed in, yeah, suits ain't cheap, gas prices too. At first, I thought they were just venting. Families complain, it's what they do. But the comments kept coming, passive-aggressive little jabs left and right, until the message was clear as day. If you want us there, you better make it worth our while. I tried to be gracious. I offered to help them find affordable options, suggested ride-sharing with other family members, even offered to book a modest motel nearby for them at my own expense. It was met with tight-lipped silence. Until one afternoon, my mom finally snapped. If you really cared about family, you wouldn't expect us to shell out for all this. You'd help us out. You're the one getting married. That was the moment the air shifted. It wasn't about celebrating my happiness. It was about leverage, about guilt, about making me responsible for their effort to show up. I remember sitting in the kitchen, holding the phone, staring at the blank wall like it could offer me answers. I realized then, love, in their eyes, always had a price tag. I politely refused. I told them the wedding was small, intimate, and we simply couldn't afford to bankroll everyone's trip. I said it firmly but kindly, hoping they'd understand. They didn't. The calls stopped. The texts dried up. No can't wait to see you, no congrats, honey, just radio silence. A few weeks later, Daniel and I mailed out the invitations, handwritten, heartfelt, sealed with trembling hope. I spent days checking my mailbox like a teenager waiting for a college acceptance letter. Nothing came, not even a simple RSVP from my own parents. Friends noticed. Hey, Arya, is your mom coming? Someone asked at the bridal shower. I forced a smile, waved it off with a joke about family drama, but inside it gutted me. Daniel held my hand under the table. No words, just the steady warmth of someone who knew how much it hurt to pretend you weren't hurting. As the wedding date crept closer, I began to shift internally. I stopped imagining their faces in the front row. I stopped saving them a seat. In the quiet hours after work, I sat on the couch with a glass of cheap red wine, scrolling through old photos, Christmas mornings, birthdays, family road trips. Each memory now felt like a mirage, a thing I had desperately believed was real until it faded under the harsh sun of reality. One evening, as Daniel and I stuffed gift bags for our tiny guest list friends, a few coworkers, a couple of distant cousins, he looked at me and asked carefully, "Are you sure you're okay doing this without them?" I hesitated, staring at the ribbon in my hands. Part of me still wanted to believe they would show up last minute, all smiles and apologies, blaming work or traffic or a forgotten calendar. But another part, a deeper, older part of me, knew better. I looked Daniel in the eye and said, maybe they were never really there in the first place. The night before the wedding, the apartment was quieter than usual. No buzzing phone, no frantic last-minute advice from a mother who was supposed to be thrilled for her daughter. Just me, Daniel, and the echo of a family that had chosen silence over celebration. We had an early dinner, something simple, spaghetti and garlic bread, because neither of us had the appetite for anything fancy. Afterward, Daniel went to double-check the suits while I curled up on the couch, staring at the ceiling, wondering when exactly I had lost them. Maybe when I chose a different path. Maybe when I stopped being the version of me they could control. The clock ticked past midnight. Still no messages, no missed calls, nothing. I got up, checked the front door one last time like some desperate kid waiting for Santa Claus. Nothing but the soft hum of Texas night air. I turned off the porch light, locked the door, and whispered to myself, "This is my life now." I didn't know yet, but the envelope would arrive tomorrow, sealing everything I hadn't dared to admit. Morning dragged itself in, sunlight leaking across the hardwood like a warning. I brewed coffee out of habit and sat by the window staring at the dead street. Deep down, I had always known this day would come, the day I'd have to admit my family was never the fairy tale I pretended it was. The knock came just before noon. No balloons, no hugs. Just a worn envelope shoved halfway into the doorframe, as if even the delivery deserved no ceremony. I pulled it free. My hands felt colder than they should have been under the Texas sun. Inside, a single sheet of lined paper. 6 words in my mother's sharp, unmistakable handwriting. "Deal with it. You chose this life." No signature, no warmth. Just a final dismissal from people I once called home. I set the paper on the kitchen table like it might detonate. Daniel walked in from checking the car and froze at my face. "What is it?" he asked. I slid the paper over. He read it once, then again. His jaw clenched. "You don't deserve this," he said quietly. No, I thought. I didn't. But it wasn't new. It had been building for years, layer upon invisible layer, until everything finally cracked. 6 years. 6 years of paying rent when Dad's unemployment ran dry. 6 years of covering Mom's endless doctor visits for a bad back that didn't stop her shopping sprees. 6 years of co-signing loans for Celeste because you're the responsible one, Aria. I wasn't a daughter anymore. I was a safety net nobody thanked, only leaned on. I thought back to one Christmas Eve when I hesitated to cover another month's rent. Mom, irritated, had snapped, "We raised you. The least you can do is help your family survive." Survive. As if I owed them my future because they gave me a childhood of broken promises. Not once had anyone said thank you. Not when I paid for Dad's truck repairs after another drunk crash. Not when I bailed Celeste out of another failed semester. It wasn't love. It was expectation. And the day I said no refusing to fund their appearance at my wedding, they cut me out without hesitation. I turned my coffee mug in my hands, remembering when the cracks really started to show. I had met Daniel during a company food bank event. We spent hours packing boxes, trading dry jokes about our overzealous supervisor. Daniel wasn't flashy, no degree, no designer clothes. He was steady, the kind of man who remembered my coffee order without asking. Telling my family about him was like throwing raw meat to wolves. At a tense dinner 6 months before the wedding, I introduced him. Mom gave him a look like she was spotting a stray dog. Dad muttered into his beer, "Couldn't do better, huh?" Celeste waited until we were doing dishes to whisper, "Guess you settle when you're scared to end up alone." I laughed it off, pretended it didn't gut me. But driving home, Daniel saw through it. "You know that's not normal, right?" he said gently. I stared out the window, unable to defend them anymore, because it wasn't normal, and maybe it never had been. Their pride in me was conditional. It was about control, about appearances. I was useful as long as I made them look good, and when I chose a life they couldn't dictate, I stopped being their daughter. Daniel squeezed my hand. "You don't owe them your happiness." Simple words. Dangerous words. They shook everything loose inside me. After that, we moved forward alone. We booked a small barbecue joint for catering, picked wildflowers over roses, ordered plain wedding bands, no diamonds, no show. When friends asked about the guest list, the bridal party, the speeches, I lied. "Oh, we're keeping it intimate. Just close friends." I wasn't just mourning their absence. I was mourning the illusion of who I thought they were. Maybe some families are built by blood. Others are built by the people who choose to show up. And mine had made their choice clear. I thought the worst was over. I was wrong. The days leading up to the wedding blurred into a strange mixture of tension and hollow excitement. After finalizing the last-minute details, Daniel and I tried to distract ourselves grocery runs, making seating charts, even binge-watching an old sitcom neither of us liked that much. Anything to drown out the silence that had settled over my phone like dust on a forgotten shelf. Every few hours, I would glance at it, almost involuntarily, like some desperate reflex. Maybe a message had come through. Maybe they'd changed their minds. Maybe they'd realized how cruel it all looked from the outside. But the screen stayed stubbornly blank. No missed calls. No, "We're proud of you." No, "Can't wait to see you walk down the aisle." I kept telling myself it didn't matter, that I didn't need their validation, that I was stronger than this, but it didn't stop the small, relentless ache from chewing at the edges of my heart. One evening after dinner, Daniel and I took a walk around the block. The Texas air was thick but cooling, the cicadas humming their endless summer song. I tucked my arm into his as we strolled under the orange streetlights. "I'm sorry they're not better," Daniel said quietly. I shook my head. "You don't have to be sorry for them. They've made their choices." The truth tasted bitter but necessary. I wanted to believe it was enough. It wasn't. The next morning, while sorting through emails, my phone buzzed on the table. Not a call, a text. I grabbed it before my mind could race too far. It was from my mother. "Good luck, but you're not family anymore. You chose your side." No greeting, no explanation, just a cold verdict, as if she were slamming a door in my face without even bothering to look me in the eye. For a moment, the world tilted. I sat there, blinking at the screen, reading it over and over as if repetition would make the words change. They didn't. Daniel came in from the kitchen carrying 2 mugs of coffee. He froze when he saw my face. Without a word, I handed him the phone. He read it, once, twice, his jaw tightening with every pass. Then he set the phone down carefully, almost reverently, and wrapped his arms around me from behind. I didn't cry. I thought I might. I thought maybe the dam would break at last. But all I felt was a kind of numbness, a hollow echo where love should have been. They had drawn their line in the sand. I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was, what? A stranger? A disappointment? An enemy? I sat there for a long time, letting the stillness fill the room, feeling it seep into my bones. Daniel didn't rush me. He just stayed there, a steady presence in a world that suddenly felt unfamiliar and sharp-edged. 2 days later, just when I thought maybe the worst was behind me, I logged onto Facebook to check the final RSVPs from friends. At the top of my feed was a photo posted by my father. A family dinner, my parents, Celeste, Margot, Vince, gathered around a table piled high with food, laughing like some Hallmark card version of themselves. No seat empty, no one missing, no room left for me. The caption burned like acid in my throat. "Real family doesn't betray you for strangers." The likes and comments piled up fast. "Love you guys! Family first, always! So proud to know you stand for what matters." Not one comment questioning where I was. Not one person asking why the bride-to-be wasn't at her own family's gathering. I stared at the screen until the words blurred together. Daniel found me there, still frozen, hours later. He didn't ask what was wrong. He didn't have to. He just turned off the monitor and pulled me up from the chair, guiding me gently to the couch like I was made of something fragile. We sat there in silence. No explanations, no fake smiles, no pretending. Just truth heavy, ugly, and unbreakable. That night, lying awake with the ceiling fan spinning lazy circles above me, I replayed it all in my mind. Every time I'd paid their bills, every time I'd swallowed their insults, every time I'd begged, silently or out loud, for just a scrap of affection. And for what? A text that cut me loose like dead weight. A Facebook post that erased me from the family history. I turned onto my side, facing Daniel's sleeping form. His breathing was slow and steady, a calm rhythm against the chaos roaring in my head. For the first time in my adult life, I didn't cry myself to sleep over them. I didn't make excuses. I didn't wonder what I could have done differently. Instead, I whispered into the dark, "I'm not going to beg anymore." And for the first time, I meant it. I thought losing them would destroy me. Instead, it freed me. Morning sunlight poured through the thin curtains, pooling onto the hardwood floors like liquid gold. I blinked awake, momentarily forgetting what day it was, letting a fragile, impossible hope crack open inside my chest. Maybe today would be different. Maybe someone would show up. Maybe they'd realize what they were about to lose. The apartment was eerily quiet. Daniel had already gotten up, probably making coffee like he always did when he sensed I needed a few more minutes to gather myself. I sat up slowly, swinging my feet onto the cold floor, staring blankly at the small makeshift bouquet of wildflowers Daniel had picked up for me yesterday. A whisper of a smile ghosted over my lips. Even when the world felt indifferent, Daniel found ways to anchor me. A soft knock at the door broke the silence. For a second, my heart lifted an involuntary, ridiculous leap of hope. I hurried to the door, smoothing down my hair, half expecting… what? Mom standing there with teary eyes? Dad with some clumsy, gruff apology? Instead, it was just a courier. No uniform, no smile, just a man holding a small, battered envelope. No return address, no bright wrapping, just beige paper and the feeling of finality. I signed without thinking, the pen feeling heavy in my hand, and closed the door. Daniel appeared behind me, his expression cautious. "What is it?" "I don't know," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. We sat at the kitchen table, side by side, as I opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, hastily torn from a notebook. 6 words scratched out in a hurried, almost angry scrawl. "Deal with it. You chose this life. That was it. No love, no well wishes, no regrets, just a final, decisive blow." I stared at it for a long time, the words swimming before my eyes. Somewhere deep in my chest, something cracked, not a violent shatter, but a slow, inevitable break, like ice splitting across a frozen lake, quiet but irreversible. Daniel reached out and placed his hand over mine, squeezing gently. I didn't cry. There were no tears left to give them, only a hollow, aching clarity. I folded the paper back into the envelope and set it down carefully, as if it were something toxic. That was when I noticed my phone buzzing. At first I hoped, foolishly, that maybe it was someone reaching out to offer support. Instead, it was a string of messages from a few mutual friends. Cold, formal, awkwardly polite. "Sorry, Arya, can't make it today. Hope it's beautiful, though. We're tied up with family stuff, but sending good vibes." Every message a new splinter, driving deeper into already raw skin. Confused, I checked my social media, digging through the trail they'd left behind like breadcrumbs. It didn't take long to find it. A private message chain screenshots forwarded from a mutual friend who hadn't bought into the Whisper campaign. Margot, my own aunt, had been quietly messaging people behind my back for weeks. "Arya's making reckless choices. Not sure we should be supporting this. It's better to stay neutral and let her figure it out on her own." Neutral. As if watching someone bleed out alone at their own wedding was a respectable choice. I sat there, stunned, the betrayal washing over me in slow, nauseating waves. It wasn't just absence, it was sabotage. Daniel crouched beside my chair, grounding me again with his steady presence. "You didn't lose family today," he said quietly. "You lost people who never deserved to call themselves that." The words stung sharp and undeniable, but there was a stitching happening too, somewhere deep inside. Tiny, invisible threads weaving a new kind of strength through the places I'd been left torn open. I pressed my forehead to his shoulder, breathing in the clean, familiar scent of his soap, coffee, and the barest trace of the aftershave he wore for special occasions. "Today is still ours," he whispered. "No one gets to steal that from you." I nodded slowly, letting his certainty seep into my bones. Later that afternoon, as I stood before the mirror in my simple lace dress, I saw it clearly for the first time. Not the girl desperate for approval, not the daughter pleading to be seen, but the woman who had finally chosen herself. I placed my hand gently over my heart and said, aloud to my reflection, "Today is not about what I lost. It's about what I refused to lose myself." There was no music swelling in the background, no cinematic transformation, just me, breathing steadily, staring down the ghost of every apology I'd ever owed them. The door creaked open, and Daniel peeked inside, his smile small but steady. "Ready?" he asked. I nodded once, firm. I would walk down that aisle carrying nothing from them but the weight they taught me to shed. The sun was already climbing high over Austin when I stood by the window, my bouquet clutched loosely in one hand, feeling strangely weightless. The morning had unfurled quietly, almost too quietly. Part of me wanted to believe the worst was over, that today, of all days, would be untouched. Then my phone buzzed. It was a message from Celeste. Can't wait to celebrate you today. For a moment, one heartbreaking, foolish moment, I allowed myself to believe it. To believe that maybe, just maybe, my sister meant it. That despite everything, she would show up not to sabotage, but to stand by me. I tucked the phone away carefully and smiled at Daniel, who was tightening his tie in the mirror. Looks like Celeste might come after all, I said, trying to sound casual. Daniel met my eyes in the reflection. His smile was small, cautious. We'll see, he said simply. We headed to the venue, a small sunlit garden tucked behind a historic inn downtown. Wildflowers lined the simple aisle, their bright faces tilted toward the sky. It wasn't the grand wedding I'd once daydreamed about, but it was honest. It was ours. Guests started arriving, familiar faces from work, from college. Some hugged me tightly, whispering congratulations. Some avoided eye contact altogether, their smiles brittle. I chalked it up to nerves to their awkwardness over my family's absence. Until one of my coworkers, Jess, pulled me aside near the makeshift bar. "Hey," she said, looking uncomfortable. "You might want to see this." She handed me her phone. On the screen played a TikTok, already racking up hundreds of likes. There was Celeste, pouting dramatically into the camera, swiping fake tears from her cheeks. Text scrawled across the top. Sometimes desperate people call it love. Laughter flooded the comment section. I froze, the glass of water trembling slightly in my hand. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the audacity to pretend to support me to my face while stabbing me publicly in the back, to mock the happiest day of my life like it was some cheap joke. I felt Daniel at my side before I even registered moving. He glanced at Jess' phone, his jaw tightening. "You don't have to deal with this today," he said, voice low. But I knew better. I had to deal with it because ignoring it was how they'd won for so long. The ceremony started moments later. I tucked the phone away, pressing the rising anger deep into my gut, burying it beneath my vows, my trembling hands, my determined smile. As I stood across from Daniel, our hands linked together, the officiant reading words I barely heard, I felt the betrayal like a bruise spreading across my chest. But when Daniel looked at me, really looked at me, all I saw was someone who chose me, freely and fiercely. We exchanged vows in the warm Texas sun, wildflowers swaying in the breeze, and for a few minutes the noise faded away. Until the reception. I barely had time to savor our first dance before the second knife twisted. Whispers slithered through the crowd, sly and poisonous. "Did you hear? Apparently she had to rush the wedding. I heard she's already pregnant." One guest, someone I'd only met through a friend of a friend, even came up, clinking their glass awkwardly. "Congratulations! When's the baby due?" My breath caught, my smile freezing on my face. I glanced at Daniel, who caught on immediately, his arm wrapped protectively around my waist, pulling me closer. "They're disgusting," he muttered under his breath. It didn't take a genius to figure out where the rumor had started. Celeste again, doing what she did best, poisoning the well. This time, though, I wasn't crumbling. I caught Daniel's eye and gave the smallest shake of my head. Not here. Not now. Instead, I clutched his hand tighter and lifted my chin. When it came time for the toasts, Daniel took the mic briefly. He didn't mention the absent family. Didn't talk about regrets or what could have been. He simply said, "Sometimes the family you build is stronger than the family you're born into." Applause rose up around us, genuine and fierce. I blinked fast, feeling the tears prick at the corners of my eyes, but not from sadness this time. After the formalities ended, and the cake was cut, and the last guest stumbled laughing toward an Uber, Daniel and I retreated back to our apartment. Still in my dress, still barefoot, I sat on the floor of our living room, scrolling through my phone. The TikTok was still climbing in views. The comments were still cruel. But now I saw it clearly. This wasn't about me. It was about their need to punish me for leaving the cage they'd built. and I wasn't going to let them control the narrative anymore. I started gathering evidence, screenshots of Celeste's TikTok, messages from guests whispering the pregnancy rumor, photos of the family BBQ being posted the same day as my wedding, all of them laughing, raising beers, as if they'd dodged a bullet by skipping my happiness. I created a folder on my desktop, labeling it quietly, Truth. I wasn't planning on rage posting, no dramatic confrontations, no screaming matches. I was going to be smart. I was going to be strategic. And I was going to make sure they never forgot the day they chose to lose me. Morning light spilled through the blinds, casting pale stripes across the small apartment floor. I was still in my pajamas, a cup of lukewarm coffee abandoned on the table, the truth folder open in front of me. There was something mechanical about my movements, now printing screenshots, saving links, organizing names and timestamps. Daniel padded over from the kitchen, refilling my coffee without a word. His quiet support anchored me, even when my hands trembled slightly. The notification pinged on my phone almost sounded casual. Ping! I ignored it at first. Ping! Another. Finally, sighing, I swiped it open. It was a message from my friend Rachel, one of the few who had stood by me without wavering. You need to see this. Attached was a Facebook post. My fingers tightened around the phone as I opened it. Photos filled the screen. My family gathered in Margot's backyard. Balloons, grinning faces, red Solo cups raised high, tables stacked with barbecue ribs and potato salad. The caption read, Celebrating real family and true values today. Some ties are better cut loose. The timestamp said it all. The same day, the same hour I had been standing in a white dress, vowing myself to a new beginning. Pain twisted inside me, sharp and brutal. They hadn't just skipped my wedding. They had celebrated my absence. I stared at the images until they blurred, rage and heartbreak warring for space in my chest. Daniel came up behind me, reading over my shoulder. His hand tightened briefly on my shoulder, his silence louder than any words. I dropped the phone onto the couch, the sound jarring in the stillness. I guess they didn't want to miss out on their kind of party, I said, voice flat. Daniel shook his head, jaw set tight. They're not family, not anymore. I thought that was the worst of it. I really did. Until Rachel messaged again. There's a video too. Reluctantly, I clicked the link. The footage was shaky, someone's phone recording laughter and clinking glasses. Then the camera panned to a makeshift altar, an old wooden crate covered in white fabric, set up in the middle of the yard. Margot stood beside it, holding a cheap plastic bowl filled with water. She raised it high and announced loudly, Today we cleanse ourselves of betrayal. We wash away disloyalty. Everyone whooped and cheered as she dipped her hand dramatically into the bowl, flicking water around like a bad imitation of a priest. The caption underneath? You can't cleanse the ungrateful, but at least we tried. I didn't realize I was shaking until Daniel gently took the phone from my hand. He stared at it for a long moment, then without a word, placed it face down on the table with a thud. They don't deserve to have any piece of you left, he said finally, his voice low and hard. Something cold settled inside me, not sadness, not even rage anymore, just a clarity sharp enough to cut through bone. I stood slowly, walking over to the Truth folder. Opening a new subfolder titled BBQ Mockery, I began saving screenshots of the video, the comments, the laughter. I wasn't doing this to hurt them. I was doing this to save myself from ever doubting again. Every lie, every manipulation, every betrayal. I would document it all, not to weaponize, but to remember, so that no apology wrapped in crocodile tears would ever sway me again. The corkboard wed hung up for wedding seating charts quickly transformed into something else entirely. Pins connected screenshots to text messages. Photos overlapped like scars across its surface. Financial abuse, public humiliation, psychological manipulation. Daniel helped without asking questions, pinning up images silently beside me. This wasn't revenge. This was survival. That night, while Daniel slept, I sat at the kitchen table with a worn notebook and a cheap ballpoint pen. I wrote, I owe them nothing. I owe myself everything. The words bled into the page, permanent and unflinching. I closed the notebook carefully, setting it beside the growing mountain of evidence. Looking around our small apartment, the thrift store couch, the secondhand dishes, the wedding photos we hadn't even framed yet, I realized something powerful. They had thought they were burying me under shame. All they'd done was plant a seed, and whatever grew next would be something they could neither control nor crush. I wasn't their broken little girl anymore. I was the wildfire they never saw coming. The next morning, the sun barely breached the windows, when Daniel found me hunched over the laptop, brows knitted tight, scrolling through my credit report. I hadn't planned to check it. Honestly, I'd been avoiding anything that might add another crack to my already fractured heart. But something gnawed at me, now an instinct honed from too many years of ignoring the obvious. The first red flag hit me like a slap. A credit card account I didn't recognize, opened 6 months ago. Then another, and another. 4 cards, all maxed out. Thousands of dollars in debt under my name. My chest tightened as I clicked through the details. Electronics, furniture, spa treatments, transactions I had never authorized, never even dreamed of affording when Daniel and I were scraping by to plan a backyard wedding. There it was. My betrayal, no longer just emotional but financial, tangible, legal. I clenched my fists so hard my knuckles cracked. They hadn't just abandoned me. They had robbed me. Daniel sat down beside me, reading over my shoulder. His jaw ticked once tight, controlled fury. "They didn't just cross a line," he said lowly. "They buried it." Before I could even begin to process the fraud, my email chimed. I glanced at the sender. Darlene Evans, my mother. Against my better judgment, I opened it. "Dear Arya, we know things got a little heated lately. Families fight, that's normal. Maybe you could help us out with some overdue bills, you know. Start fresh? Let's not hold on to grudges. After all, we're family. Love, Mom." No apology for the years of neglect. No acknowledgement of the mockery. No mention of the theft. Just another ask. Another grab. Another hand reaching into my chest cavity, prying for anything still warm. I slammed the laptop closed with a force that rattled the dishes in the sink. Daniel didn't say anything. He didn't have to. I paced the tiny living room, words jamming in my throat, hands fisting at my sides. How many times had I fallen for it? How many times had I mistaken their need for love? They didn't want me. They wanted what I could give. And when I stopped giving, they started taking. The day's offenses weren't finished. Rachel texted me around noon. "You need to see this. It's bad." Another link. Another betrayal. Screenshots this time, messages between Celeste and a mutual acquaintance. My sister me blood had offered someone money to spread rumors that I was mentally unstable. That my wedding meltdown wasn't about betrayal, but about my history of emotional issues. That I wasn't a wronged daughter, I was a ticking bomb. It was vicious, calculated, designed to isolate me further, to cut me off from any remaining sympathy. Daniel read over my shoulder, his face like granite. "We don't let this slide," he said flatly. "Not anymore." And I agreed. I wasn't going to fight this war emotionally. I was going to fight it smart. We spent the afternoon building the case. Daniel called a lawyer he knew through work, getting advice on identity theft and credit fraud. I contacted the credit bureaus, placed fraud alerts on my reports, started disputes on every unauthorized account. I filed a police report. Every screen capture, every message, every Facebook post went into carefully dated folders. This wasn't just about feeling betrayed anymore. This was about consequences. I wasn't their ATM. I wasn't their emotional punching bag. I was a grown woman whose patience had finally, irrevocably expired. As dusk fell, I sat back and surveyed the corkboard now covered in evidence. It was grotesque in a way, a museum of every scar they had left on me. But it wasn't me on display anymore. It was them. Daniel brought me a cup of tea, setting it silently beside me. He didn't try to pull me out of the moment. He simply stood there, solid, real, everything they had never been. I picked up my worn notebook again, flipping to a fresh page. I wrote, "They thought love made me weak. It made me resilient." The pen scratched against the paper like a whisper of vengeance. No, I wasn't planning to destroy them publicly. That would be too easy and too close to the ugliness they had already embraced. I was going to do something far more terrifying. I was going to live better without them, and I was going to make sure every trace of their cruelty was exposed not through screaming matches or family feuds on Facebook, but legally, quietly, permanently. No more pleading, no more forgiving the unforgivable. That night, before bed, I stood by the window and stared out into the Texas night. No stars, no moon, just the humming electric buzz of a world that kept spinning, indifferent to betrayal. And for the first time, it didn't make me feel small. It made me feel infinite. It was time for the truth to be louder than their lies. Morning broke through the curtains in dull streaks of gray. I sat cross-legged on the couch, the folder of evidence spread open before me, my fingers idly tracing the edge of a printed screenshot. The apartment was silent, except for the soft ticking of the clock. Daniel poured coffee into my favorite chipped mug and set it beside me without a word. The question hovered in the air between us, unspoken but deafening. Was I going to stay silent again? Or was I finally going to choose myself? Daniel settled across from me, elbows on his knees, voice calm but sure. They counted on you staying quiet, Arya. That's how they win. That's how they always win. I wrapped my hands around the mug, feeling the heat seep into my palms. My heart thudded slow and steady, a metronome of something ancient and rising. This time, I wouldn't let them rewrite the ending. I opened my laptop, clicked New Post, and for the first time in my life, I told the whole truth. I uploaded it all, screenshots of the unauthorized credit cards, emails from Darlene asking for money under the guise of fake apologies, Celeste's TikTok video mocking my wedding day, photos from the barbecue party, my family smiling without me, performing their cleansing ceremony, text messages disowning me, captioned in plain, unflinching words, "This is what family first looked like for me." No anger, no vengeance. Just truth, laid bare for anyone willing to see. I hit post. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. The ripple effect started small. A few likes, a few comments. "I'm so sorry you went through this. You deserve better. Family isn't blood, it's loyalty." Then the shares began, and the anger, and the disbelief. Within hours, the post had gone viral. My phone buzzed nonstop with notifications, friends I hadn't heard from in years, strangers offering solidarity, even local news reporters sliding into my DMs, asking if I was willing to share my story publicly. For once, the shame wasn't mine to carry. It was theirs. Margot and Vince were the first to feel the sting. Someone from their corporate HR flagged the post. By noon, a formal investigation had been launched into misuse of company resources. Margot had used her company email to coordinate some of the BBQ smears. By evening, Celeste's influencer partnerships began to crumble. One brand after another dropped her quietly but decisively. No grand apologies, no reckonings from them. Only angry, self-pitying Facebook statuses that backfired spectacularly under the sheer weight of public scrutiny. "People love to tear families apart," Darlene posted bitterly. "Not everything you hear is true." The comments underneath weren't kind. "Maybe you should have thought about that before you stole from your own daughter." "The receipts don't lie, ma'am. You raised her just to use her. Shame on you." Each comment was a stitch in the wound they had left, sewing it shut from the outside in. Watching it unfold didn't bring me the gleeful satisfaction I once thought it might. Instead, it felt quiet, heavy, right. I didn't dance in the ruins of what they destroyed. I simply walked away from the ashes. Daniel and I sat on the couch that night, the glow of my phone dim against the darkened living room. He didn't say, "I told you so." He didn't say, "You should be proud." He just leaned over, kissed my temple, and whispered, "You're free now." And somehow, for the first time, I believed it. I blocked every number connected to them. I filed the paperwork to change my legal name, the name they had used to control, to shame, to siphon. I chose a new Wania name that carried no echoes of their cruelty. Standing at the courthouse weeks later, Daniel holding my hand, I signed the documents with a hand that didn't shake. It wasn't about revenge, it was about reclamation, ownership, salvation. I wasn't erasing the past. I was refusing to let it define me. As I walked out into the crisp Texas air, papers clutched tightly in one hand, Daniel's fingers threaded through the other. I felt lighter, cleaner, whole. Maybe burning bridges wasn't destruction after all. Maybe sometimes it was the only way to save yourself from drowning. Sometimes burning bridges isn't destruction. It's salvation. The sun felt different that morning, not blinding or oppressive, just warm, gentle against my skin as I walked out of the courthouse for the second time, clutching a new set of papers close to my chest. My name, the one they'd weaponized against me for decades, was gone. In its place, a name I chose. A name no one could stain with their lies or betrayal. Daniel waited by the truck, a bouquet of sunflowers in his hands, grinning like we had just won something bigger than any court ruling. And maybe we had. We didn't rush home. We stopped for coffee at a sleepy diner off the highway, the kind with chipped mugs and old country songs playing too softly to recognize. I sipped my coffee slowly, breathing in the freedom like oxygen. The future wasn't mapped out yet. It didn't need to be. For the first time in my life, the future felt like something I could create, not something I had to survive. Weeks later, we moved into a small house on the outskirts of town. It wasn't much, 2 bedrooms, a little patch of backyard struggling under the Texas heat, but it was ours. No hand-me-downs laced with guilt. No pictures of faces smiling through gritted teeth on the walls. Just space to heal, to rebuild, to breathe. We painted the living room a soft shade of green, the color of new beginnings. Adopted a mutt from the shelter, a shy little creature with scars we couldn't see but somehow understood. We named him Lucky. The nights were quieter out there. No sirens, no angry phone calls, no echoes of guilt trailing into the dark. Just crickets, the low hum of the ceiling fan, and Daniel's steady breathing beside me. Every now and then, the old wounds itched. A memory would sneak up on me, a Christmas morning spent trying to buy their approval, a birthday where the only gift was silence. But the memories didn't own me anymore. They were just there, like faded scars, proof I had healed, not proof I was broken. Of course, they tried half-heartedly. Celeste posted vague, passive-aggressive quotes about traitorous family members and fake victims on her Instagram stories. Margot shared old family photos from years ago with captions like, "Some people forget where they come from." I didn't answer, didn't comment, didn't rage, because their audience had shrunk. Their words, once daggers, now fell dull and ignored. Some distant cousins I barely knew sent awkward messages. "Hey, sorry things went down the way they did. Hope you're good." I read them, smiled a little at the irony, and hit delete. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was simply uninterested. The battle was over, and I had won not because I destroyed them, but because I refused to let them destroy me. Trust, of course, would take time. I joined a local support group for adults estranged from their families, not because I needed to vent, but because I wanted to build real connections, real community, real belonging. I listened to others tell their stories, some eerily similar, others heartbreakingly worse, and found comfort not in shared anger, but in shared survival. We laughed more than we cried. We talked about gardens and jobs and terrible dating stories. We celebrated each other's wins, no matter how small. Healing wasn't a grand explosion. It was quiet. It was in the mornings I woke up and didn't brace myself for disappointment. It was in the dinners where no one measured love in dollars or obedience. It was in the laughter that bubbled up unexpectedly when Daniel tried and failed to bake bread from scratch one Saturday. It was in the peace that came from knowing no one else had the power to define me anymore. On my first birthday after the name change, I checked my new P.O. box, curious. Inside was a card unsigned, ugly in its bitterness. Without opening it, I walked to the nearest trash can and dropped it inside. Some things didn't deserve even a second of your time. Instead, I went home, baked a simple vanilla cake, lopsided and imperfect. Daniel and I ate it on the back porch, barefoot, Lucky curled at our feet, the stars winking back at us like they were finally in on the joke. No fancy toasts, no grand speeches, no need for anything more. Just a quiet life built from scratch, strong, stubborn, and finally mine. And as the candles flickered out, I whispered a simple prayer to the dark. Thank you for the ending, and for the beginning. Because sometimes, Family isn't the blood that binds you. Sometimes, family is what you build, not what you survive. After everything I lived through, here's the truth no one tells you early enough. Family isn't just about blood. It's about choice, respect, safety. You don't owe your peace to people who weaponize your loyalty. You don't have to keep bleeding just because someone else hands you the knife with a smile. Choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. And healing, real healing, sometimes means walking away without needing to slam the door. It means quietly rebuilding a life so full, so joyful, that their absence feels like freedom, not loss. If you're standing at that crossroads right now, wondering if it's okay to put yourself first, let me tell you, it is, and you deserve to. Because you were never too much. You were never the problem. You were simply trying to bloom in a garden that refused to water you. So bloom anyway. And now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you thought would never betray you? What was the hardest part? And what did you learn about yourself? Drop a comment below, even just a simple 1 inch if this story touched your heart. Or tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to know how far our little community is reaching. And hey, if you felt seen, if you found even a flicker of strength through this story, please hit that subscribe button and stay connected. We have so many more real, raw, and healing stories to share together. You are not alone here. Thank you for listening and for being part of something real. Hi, I'm Akina. At Christmas, my parents gave my seat to a stranger. Not metaphorically, my name was literally replaced at the table. They put me near the door, like I was just dropping by. That night, I watched them toast the people who stole from me. I watched them give my gift to someone else. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was realizing they'd been rewriting the story for years, quietly cutting me out of everything, my savings, the will, even the family photo wall. And when I finally stepped back, they didn't apologize. They deleted me. But what happens when the one you erase has the receipts and finally decides to use them? It was Christmas Eve in Savannah, and the wind didn't care about holiday spirit. It slipped beneath my coat collar like a thief, sharp and deliberate, even though I'd layered up. Zadie, my daughter, held my hand tight. Her other arm clutched a tinfoil-covered casserole dish, mac and cheese, extra breadcrumbs, because I remembered who liked it that way. We stood outside my parents' house for longer than we should have. No porch light, no welcome sign, no bark from the neighbor's dog like when I used to live here. Just the sound of our shoes scuffing the steps and the slight tremble in Zadie's breath as she said, "Maybe they're busy." I rang the bell, waited. Nothing. After a full minute, I reached for the back door, the one I used to sneak out of as a teenager and sneak back through when Dad went to bed early. It wasn't locked. Of course it wasn't. The smell hit me first. Rosemary, cinnamon ham, something baking that hadn't come from a store. I paused in the threshold for a second. It should have felt like coming home. But standing there, balancing hot food and a child, something inside me hesitated. The kind of hesitation that didn't come from nerves, but recognition. Like my body already knew something my head didn't want to admit. No one looked up. My mother, Clarabelle, was at the counter, folding cloth napkins into hard little triangles. Maris, my older sister, was laughing too loud at something her best friend said. Dad stood by the living room window, swirling bourbon in his hand, like he'd just walked off a Southern novel cover. No one asked why I'd come in through the back. No one asked how I was. I set the dish down quietly and brushed snow from Zadie's shoulders. "Hi," I said, voice too soft. "We brought dessert." Clarabelle didn't stop folding napkins. Maris turned her head slightly, then went right back to whatever she was whispering. I waited another beat before stepping closer. "We brought mac and cheese and that cranberry pie you like." "Oh," Clarabelle finally said, not turning. "We thought you might not come this year." My stomach folded the same way those napkins did. I confirmed with Maris 2 weeks ago. Maris looked up now. "Right. It's just been so crazy lately. You know how the holidays are." I didn't respond. I helped Zadie out of her coat and looked toward the dining room. That's when I saw it. 12 seats, all dressed with silver-rimmed plates, linen napkins, and handwritten name cards. Maris's handwriting, loopy and deliberate, like always. I scanned for mine. Maybe I missed it. Maybe I'd find it on the far end, near the kids section, if they even had one. Nothing. Instead, right next to the entryway where Boots dripped water onto the mat, I saw it. A small wooden stool, the kind you use when you need to reach the top cabinet. On it sat my name, folded into a tent card, right beneath the thermostat, next to the coat rack, where guests dropped scarves and dogs shook off snow. "Mommy," Zadie whispered, tugging my sleeve. "Why aren't we sitting at the big table?" I glanced toward the long mahogany piece that I used to polish every Thanksgiving. Maris's friend, the one who divorced last year, was sitting in the spot I used to fill, right beside Dad. Her cardigan was draped over the back like she owned it. Clarabelle must have noticed us staring. "We figured it'd be easier for you and Zadie, near the door in case she gets fussy. The seat's right there." She didn't say it unkindly. That almost made it worse. Zadie looked up at me, confused but quiet. Her fingers were still clutching the edge of her sleeve. I could see the worry behind her big brown eyes, the same look she gave me when I picked her up late from aftercare, and she thought maybe I forgot. I knelt down, brushing her hair behind her ear. "It's okay, baby. Let's just get settled." I said it like I believed it. I didn't. We sat on the stool, the draft from the door wrapped around us like we didn't belong. I helped her unwrap the tinfoil from the casserole, still warm, untouched. The room buzzed with voices and laughter, familiar but not meant for me. The fireplace crackled from across the room, but the heat never made it to where we sat. Zadie nibbled on a roll someone handed her. I sat still, watching the others laugh, pass dishes, take photos with people they'd only known since Easter brunch. No one asked how my job was going. No one asked how the move went after I'd been forced to downsize post-divorce. And I didn't expect much, but I had expected something. Even silence used to feel like shared history. This felt like removal. I used to set that table, every year. Used to help Maris pick out centerpieces. Used to drop extra cash into Clarabelle's account when she said the light bill had gotten a little tight after Dad's surgery. Used to carry things, quietly, without receipts. I counted. 1 casserole, 1 child, and 0 acknowledgement. Zadie leaned into my shoulder, resting her head there. "Are we gonna stay long?" she whispered. I looked around the room again, the family I used to fight to hold together, too busy laughing with everyone but me. "Not too long," I said. I didn't squeeze her hand, not yet. We lingered at that tiny stool near the door until Zadie's legs began to swing slowly beneath her, a quiet signal that she was done sitting but didn't know where else to be. The sound in the house stayed the same, silverware clinking, glasses refilled, voices rising and dipping without us. Nothing was wrong on the surface, but everything had shifted under it. I helped carry the dessert tray into the kitchen, not because anyone asked, but because habits die hard. Maris was leaned up against the counter, telling her friend about a rental property she and Lazaro were eyeing in Destin. 2 blocks from the beach, she said, laughing. "We'll Airbnb the crap out of it when we're not using it." Her friend nodded, like they were in on a secret the rest of us didn't qualify for. Clarabelle poured white wine into stemless glasses, 3 in a row, not one extended in my direction. She didn't even glance up when I set down the casserole dish, now lukewarm and untouched. Someone mumbled, "Akina's here, right?" But it was more confirmation than welcome. I smiled. Not out of politeness, just to prove to myself that my face still moved that way. Zadie stood by the hallway archway, clutching her sketchpad. I motioned for her to come sit near me on the couch. Instead, she found her way to the rug where the other kids had piled up. Nieces, nephews, Maris's goddaughter, all in a circle around a tablet playing a holiday cartoon. I should have known better than to think it would go unnoticed when she wasn't called by name. Clarabelle passed out hot chocolate in matching red mugs. She handed one to every child. When she reached Zadie, she paused, mug in hand. "Did Zadie even send a list this year?" she asked with a furrowed brow, turning slightly toward Maris. "She did," I said quickly. "I emailed it to you Thanksgiving weekend." "Oh," she said, blinking. "Maybe it got lost in the shuffle. You know how these things go." Zadie looked up from the rug, trying not to show she was listening, but her hand stilled over her coloring. She sat upright, her small back suddenly tense. I knelt down beside her. "They might have just missed it," I said softly. She whispered, "Did I do something wrong?" The pit in my stomach grew teeth. Before I could say anything, the call for the family photo rang out like a fire drill. Everyone shuffled toward the fireplace, where Clarabelle had staged poinsettias and garlands for her annual, card-worthy snapshot. I helped clear the mess of toys and crumbs, wiping juice off the floor after one of the toddlers tipped their cup. By the time I turned around, everyone was already lined up, Dad in the middle, Maris on one side, Clarabelle on the other. The rest clustered naturally into place, as if rehearsed. "Smile!" Maris's friend called from behind the phone. I was still off to the side, halfway between helping and waiting for instruction. No one called for me, so I stood there, just out of frame. "Don't worry, we'll take another one later," someone said absently. But they didn't. A few minutes later, I saw the picture posted on Maurice's social media. The caption read, "Bickford family, whole again." Zadie was not in it. Neither was I. Dinner began not long after. The roast came out, the rolls were passed, and laughter filled every inch of space except the corner where Zadie and I sat with our plates in our laps. I didn't realize what was missing until the gifts were brought out. The kids formed a loose semicircle around the tree. Laughter rose as the name tags were read aloud, and colorful bags changed hands. Zadie kept glancing at me, smiling each time another kid got a gift. Her name wasn't called. I watched Clarabelle reach for another package, glance at the tag, then at Zadie, and pause. "I think we might have missed one," she said, almost convincing herself. "She didn't write a letter this year, did she?" "She did," I said. "I saw her write it myself. It had stickers." Clarabelle smiled tightly. "Well, maybe it didn't make it into the pile. We'll find something later." Zadie stayed quiet, her fingers picking at the hem of her sweater. "I'm sorry, sweetie," I said later, wrapping my arm around her. "It wasn't you. It was never you." She nodded against my side, but didn't say anything. As the evening faded, I tucked her into a borrowed blanket on the pull-out couch. The light from the Christmas tree flickered across her face, painting soft gold against the shadows. I watched her chest rise and fall, the steady rhythm of a child trying not to cry while drifting to sleep. In the corner, Maris laughed at something Lazaro said. Clarabelle looked over at them the way people do when they've already chosen a side and decided not to budge. I sat down next to my daughter, pulled out my phone, and opened the Notes app. Typed, "No more defending what erases me." I didn't write it with anger. I wrote it with finality. After I set my phone down, I sat there for a while. The kind of silence that doesn't just hang in the room, it hums under your skin. Clarabelle and Maris were still talking near the fireplace, their voices low but bright, as if joy was something they could perform on cue. I stood, slowly, careful not to wake Zadie, and walked to the kitchen for a glass of water I didn't really want. The faucet hissed like it was irritated to be needed. As I drank, I let my eyes drift across the space. The polished counters, the worn holiday towel from years ago still hanging near the oven handle, the fake poinsettia arrangement Maris had bought last season because it photographed better. Everything was familiar, but none of it felt mine anymore. It hit me then, all at once. How much I had done for these people. How little of it had names on it. My name, to be exact. I remembered standing outside the grocery store 3 Decembers ago, holding a plastic bag of medication for Dad, arguing with the insurance rep over the phone because Clarabelle said she didn't understand the paperwork. I had paid the invoice on the spot, from the only bonus I'd gotten that quarter. Not a thank you, just a follow-up call a week later, asking if I'd checked on the electric bill too. Back then, it didn't even sting. I chalked it up to family. You give, you help. You don't keep track. Until they do. Of what wasn't yours to begin with. Sometime after dinner, when the wine started flowing heavier, and the noise swelled into that soft chaos only families can create, Clarabelle clinked a spoon against her glass. "Let's raise a glass," she said, standing with her usual calm authority. "To Maris and Lazaro, for everything they've carried this year, especially with your dad's health scare." She placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. He gave her a quiet smile, dazed but content. "They've been our rock, really. I don't know where we'd be without them." Maris grinned, lifted her glass with a performative flair. Lazaro gave a smug nod, not even pretending to be humble. "And me?" I sat in the corner by the end table, half in shadow, fully in disbelief. The home nurse, billed to my card, the portable oxygen, arranged through my job's concierge service, the groceries when Clarabelle said they were stretching, mine delivered, no questions asked. I stared at my half-empty wine glass. The edge of it trembled just slightly, but I kept my hand steady. Not a word, not a look in my direction. It wasn't just omission, it was a rewrite. "Cheers," Clarabelle said, and glasses clinked around the room. No one noticed I didn't raise mine. Later that night, as the wrapping paper storm began and the big gifts were passed out, Maris handed Clarabelle a long box wrapped in silver foil. Clarabelle passed it to Dad with a proud smile. "This one's from Maris and Laz," she announced, already reaching for her phone to record the moment. I knew that box. 6 weeks ago, I'd ordered a shearling coat online. Dad had hinted about one in October, after seeing a similar one in a catalog. I'd saved for it, tracked shipping twice, and wrapped it myself with a handwritten card that read, "To the man who taught me loyalty before words. Merry Christmas." Akina. Dad tore into the paper like a kid. "Now this," he said, holding it up. "This is sharp. You two really know me." Zadie, who had watched me wrap that very box in our apartment, looked over at me, confused. Her mouth opened slightly, as if she might say something. I shook my head once, just enough. "Not now, baby." I didn't ask where the card went. I didn't accuse. But I knew, and so did Maris. She didn't meet my eyes. Sometime after that, Clarabelle stood up again, a folded piece of stationery in her hand. "I wrote something," she said, voice soft, almost maternal. "Just a little something to say thank you to the people who made this year bearable." The room went quiet, not out of anticipation, more like habit. When Clarabelle spoke, people listened. She had that way about her. She cleared her throat and began. "To the children who showed up, not just in presence but in effort, who made meals, arranged rides, covered gaps without asking, who reminded me that family is not just blood, but commitment." She looked around the room, smiling at each name she read. To Maris, for never letting me face paperwork alone. To Lazaro, for bringing humor and lightness during the hardest days. To Greg, for always calling, even when he couldn't visit. That was it. She folded the paper with care, tucked it into her purse like it belonged to history. No mention of me. Not even Zadie. I stayed seated. I didn't stand. I didn't speak. Zadie didn't ask this time. Clarabelle poured herself another glass of wine. Maris slipped into the kitchen with Lazaro, laughing again. Too loud, like always. I opened the Notes app on my phone again, typed, 3 mentions, none of them mine. Then another line. This is what erasure looks like. Not loud, just done. I slid my phone back into my coat pocket and leaned into the quiet. The clatter of dessert forks and after-dinner chatter had settled into that hazy lull where half the room reaches for coffee and the other half starts checking the clock. Zadie was asleep again, curled in the corner of the couch under the blanket I'd pulled over her earlier. Her small body rising and falling steadily was the only rhythm I trusted in that house. The first wave of guests, Maris's goddaughter and her parents, started bundling up by the door. Scarves, boots, plastic containers full of leftover pie. The goodbyes were loud and long, full of fake promises to do brunch next week and not let months pass again. I knew none of those things would happen. Maris and her best friend laughed as they rinsed wine glasses. Clarabelle stood by the counter, swirling what was left in her bottle and humming along to a version of Silent Night, playing softly on the Bluetooth speaker. She walked over, calm as ever. "You're staying the night, right?" she asked, more of a statement than a question. "Can you help rinse up before you turn in?" It wasn't cruel. That's what made it worse. It was automatic, the way someone might ask a waitress for more butter. I nodded. But something inside felt different, stiffer, like something had snapped into place and wasn't bending back. I stepped into the kitchen and started clearing plates. No one thanked me. No one noticed. Clarabelle was now on the phone with one of her church friends, speaker on full blast. Her voice had the bright lilt she reserved for public image maintenance. "Yes, Maris has just been incredible," she said. "Honestly, she carried this whole season. I don't know how I'd manage without her. She's really the one who shows up, you know?" I stacked the dishes quietly, one on top of the other. Lazaro walked by, drying his hands on a dish towel. He gave me a little smirk and said, "Still the family elf, huh?" I kept loading the dishwasher. Didn't flinch, didn't laugh, didn't answer. A few minutes later, as I scrubbed the last of the pie crust off a chipped baking pan, my finger caught the edge. Not deep, but sharp enough to sting. The kind of cut that doesn't bleed right away, just burns as a reminder that, yes, something got under your skin. I pressed a paper towel around it and didn't look up when Maris entered the kitchen behind me. "You're amazing, you know that?" she said, pouring herself a splash of wine. "Most people would have left after tonight, but you just power through." I didn't answer. "You've always been the quiet one," she added, almost like it was a compliment. By the time Clarabelle called everyone back to the living room for one last toast, the air had that slow drag of a night stretching past welcome. The guests were gone. Just us now, core family and residual tension. Clarabelle held her wine glass at chest height and gave a warm smile like she was about to accept an award. "This year," she began, "was not easy. But if there's one person who got us through it, truly held this family together, it was Maris." I sat near the archway, drying my hands with a towel I didn't remember bringing in. "She always knows what to say, what to do, and where to be," Clarabelle continued. "She's intuitive, dependable, and selfless." People clapped. Even Greg, who showed up late and said 3 words all night, nodded in agreement. No one looked at me. I pulled out my phone, tapped open notes, and wrote, "They can't see you when they've already decided who the hero is." Later, when the others had disappeared to their respective corners of the house, I took Zadie upstairs. No one told us where to sleep, so I found the guest room with the twin bed and a nightstand missing a drawer. I laid her down gently, pulled the blanket up to her chin, and crawled in beside her. The applause still echoed in my head, not because it was loud, but because it was final. Zadie stirred a little and whispered, "I like the tree lights, Mommy." "Me too," I whispered back. "Just not the house they're in." And I knew by morning I'd no longer keep their secrets for them. I woke before the house stirred, the kind of early that didn't belong to alarms or roosters, just the kind born from decision. The room was dim, the light outside still a deep gray. Beside me, Zadie lay tucked in, cheeks flushed from sleep, her little fist curled close to her chest. I didn't move fast. I didn't have to. I just knew that by the time the coffee brewed downstairs, I'd already be gone, emotionally, if not yet physically. I got dressed in silence, layered up as quietly as I could. The hallway was empty, not a creak on the stairs. I slipped into the kitchen, grabbed my tote from the corner where I left it, and unzipped it. Inside, beneath a scarf and an old receipt for allergy meds, was the manila folder. It had lived in that bag for over a year. Patient, unopened, but not forgotten. I placed it on the kitchen counter like it was nothing more than a grocery list. Maris entered from the hallway in full makeup, too awake for the hour. "You're up early," she said, pouring herself a glass of orange juice. "Still playing Santa?" I smiled, but not at her. Just tying up loose ends. Breakfast started 20 minutes later. Clarabelle stood at the stove scrambling eggs. Maris set the table. Dad sat in his usual seat with the newspaper folded neatly beside him, even though he hadn't read the fine print in years. I waited until the plates were filled, the napkins unfolded, and the silence was comfortably boring. "This will be the last holiday I contribute anything," I said. Not loud, not dramatic, just honest. Clarabelle looked up from her eggs, blinked. "Sorry?" "No more tuition," I continued, glancing at her. "No more bills? No more cushion?" Lazaro chuckled. "Didn't realize you were still pitching in?" Maris let out a soft snort. "What, like the $20 for the tree last year?" I didn't respond with a quip. I reached into my tote and pulled out a sheet of paper, actually 5 sheets, stapled together, color-coded, time-stamped. I slid it across the table toward Clarabelle. She hesitated, then took it. Her eyes moved left to right, line by line. Deposits, pharmacy charges, school fees, insurance overages, grocery reimbursements she never returned. It took 2 minutes to read. She used none of them to say a word. I leaned back slightly. "Just so it's clear," I said, "who actually showed up?" Nobody argued. That told me more than if they had. After breakfast, I stood, walked over to the hallway bench, and pulled out my phone. I opened the videos folder and found the one I'd saved last December. Clarabelle had been sitting in Dad's hospital room then, her eyes puffy, her voice trembling. I'd filmed her on mute at first. She didn't know. But then she turned to me and said the words that lived rent-free in my memory ever since. "Without Akina, we'd have lost everything," she said. "She saved our home, saved me." I pressed play now, volume up. The room quieted again. You could hear the heater click on in the background, the clink of a spoon against ceramic. Clarabelle's voice from the video filled the space. "She's the only one who figured out the insurance, the only one who stayed after visiting hours." I let the video end naturally. I didn't add commentary, didn't look for applause. When it ended, I clicked the screen off, slipped the phone back into my coat, and went to zip it, slow, deliberate. Maris cleared her throat. "That was private." "No," I said. "It was unspoken. There's a difference." Clarabelle didn't say anything, just reached for her cup again. Her hand trembled a little. Zadie came down from the stairs not long after, rubbing sleep from her eyes, her bunny socks sliding on the floor. "Morning, baby," I said, crouching to meet her. "We're heading out soon." "Already? We've done what we needed to do." As we moved toward the door, she asked to use the bathroom. I nodded and waited in the hallway. That's when I saw the photo wall. Birthday parties, vacations, cookouts, Maris and Lazaro in different outfits, year after year. Clarabelle in front of the hydrangeas, Dad asleep on the recliner, Zadie as a toddler in someone else's arms. Frame after frame of a family I supposedly belonged to, and not one with me in it. Not a single photo. I stepped back, just one pace, enough to see the wall from a distance. Zadie came out and grabbed my hand. "Ready?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Let's go." I didn't slam the door when I left, but they heard it close anyway. By the time we pulled the car out of the driveway, the frost on the windshield had started to melt. I didn't blast the heat. I let the silence sit between us, same way it had all morning inside that house. Zadie held a candy cane she hadn't eaten, rolling it slowly in her palm like she was waiting for a reason to keep it. We didn't drive far, just to the gas station, where I topped off the tank and let her run inside to use the bathroom. I sat there, hands on the steering wheel, staring ahead at nothing. Clarabelle hadn't called. Maris hadn't texted. They didn't need to. I'd made my position clear. I was out. Or so I thought. When we returned later that afternoon, because Zadie had forgotten her sketchbook and begged to retrieve it before heading back home, the energy had shifted. The kitchen smelled like reheated ham, the kind that lingers just enough to remind you that joy was had and you weren't invited to it. Clarabelle caught me near the door, half smile in place. "About what you said yesterday," she began, voice sweet but measured. "Are you sure you're not, maybe reacting a little strongly?" "I'm not reacting," I told her, steady as the tile beneath me. "I'm realigning." From the hallway, Lazaro called out, "Don't stress it, Akina. We'll all laugh about this in a week." It wasn't funny. I headed to the den where Zadie's things were. That's when I passed Clarabelle's home office. The door was cracked, the desk lamp still on, papers neatly stacked in that compulsive way she always arranged everything. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. The top sheet of the file was labeled Revised Estate Plan, bolded, dated last month. I flipped it open just enough to scan the beneficiaries. Maris, Lazaro. Then a line for the lake house, our family's property upstate, a place I was once told would be mine. My name? Absent. Clarabelle entered behind me without a word. I didn't flinch, didn't turn. "You're not even in the same state anymore," she said, as if that explained theft. This just made more sense. "I'm in this family," I replied, "or at least I was." She didn't apologize. She didn't offer anything. Just moved past me, hand on the folder, ready to tuck it away like all things she preferred hidden. We left not long after. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. I didn't look back at the dining room, or the ornaments, or the wrapping paper still strewn across the floor like evidence of joy. That night, when we returned, because plans had changed, because Clarabelle insisted Zadie stay for tradition's sake, I found a handwritten note taped to the door of the room we were meant to sleep in. Laundry room, temporary guest space. There wasn't a bed, just a thin mattress folded over the dryer. A sheet, no pillows, no lamp, no window. Zadie stood in the doorway, holding her stuffed bear like a question. "Is this our fault?" she asked. "No, baby," I said, kneeling down beside her. "This is what people do when they want to punish someone without looking like they are." I laid her down gently, placed the blanket over her, and then sat beside the washer. The rumble of the pipes in the wall was louder than usual, like the house was tired of itself. I pulled the manila folder from my tote bag and spread it across my lap. Medical receipts, bank transfers, printed emails with Clarabelle's subject lines. "Just a little short this month." And, "Any chance you could cover this too?" I wasn't looking for proof. I already had it. I was looking for the nerve to do something about it. The next morning, I sat at the breakfast table while everyone else fluttered around, pretending nothing happened. Dad flipped pages of the newspaper he couldn't read. Maris gushed about some new brand deal she was working on. Lazaro made jokes about holiday calories. Clarabelle, as always, played referee through it all. She didn't say a word to me. So I said one to her. "You already wrote me out of your will," I said flatly. "Now I'm writing you out of my piece." Maris looked up from her phone. "You're being dramatic," she scoffed. I didn't lift my head. "You're just not used to me having lines. That's not the same as me not having them." Nobody replied. Zadie reached for my hand under the table, gave it a squeeze. This time, I squeezed back. I stopped being a participant in their story. I became the editor of mine. 2 days passed. We were home. I'd washed every piece of laundry that smelled faintly of their house, even the blanket Zadie clung to on the ride back. It wasn't about the scent. It was about what stayed in the fibers, what lingered between the threads. I folded it anyway, put it in the hall closet, closed the door. That morning, I opened my laptop to check my accounts. It was routine. I'd done it for years, more out of habit than worry. But this time, something felt off before I even clicked anything. The tab spun longer than usual, like the system itself was stalling. The number on the screen wasn't a typo. 12102s. I blinked. Refreshed. Looked again. still there. My savings account, which had held over $92,000, gone. Every last cent pulled out in small, consistent withdrawals. I scrolled through the activity log, my fingers stiff. All transfers labeled family reallocation or shared emergency use. Dates stretched back 3 months, and every single withdrawal was authorized through a linked device, Clarabelle's tablet. I called the bank. The rep, cheerful and efficient, confirmed my identity and walked me through the details. Yes, the device was on the profile. Yes, the routing number matched. And no, technically, there had been no breach. Just authorized family access from a shared history. "You're still the account holder," she said brightly, like that was consolation. But the account had already been gutted. I didn't cry. Not then. I closed the laptop and sat with my hands in my lap, staring at the wall across from me. It had been one thing to be forgotten, ignored, erased from cards and thank yous. It was another to be robbed by the very people who once said, "We're all in this together." Later that day, I messaged my cousin Dina. She and I had always exchanged New Year's cards. I asked if she was going to the family brunch Clarabelle usually hosted the Sunday after Christmas. "Didn't you see the invite?" she replied. I checked my inbox. Nothing. No calendar notification. No group text. I scrolled through the family thread. Gone. I had been removed from the conversation entirely. Not archived, not muted. Removed. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I messaged Maris directly. "Looks like I'm out of the loop," she replied almost instantly. "Well, you said you were out, right?" No emoji, no punctuation, just cold precision. Not long after that, I got an alert on my phone from the backup bank account I had once set up for emergencies, back when Dad was recovering from his stroke, and Clarabelle claimed they needed a buffer just in case. I still had access, or so I thought. The alert said, "Changes made to shared access permissions." I logged in. My name was gone. In its place? Maris. Lazaro. That was the final confirmation. They hadn't just cut me out emotionally or symbolically. They had worked, strategically, silently, to push me out of every formal system that held us together. I sat at my desk in the living room. The sun had gone behind the trees, casting long blue shadows across the floor. Zadie was in her room, drawing, humming to herself. She didn't know anything had changed. That was the one thing I could still protect. I picked up the landline. Not the cell, not a text, not an email. I dialed the house number I still remembered without looking. Maris answered. Of course she did. "Hello?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't ask questions. "You're good at wiping names," I said evenly. "But you're not good at erasing truth. That part always returns, with interest." She didn't respond. She didn't have to. Because that night, I did what they feared the most. I didn't threaten, I filed. 2 days after the call, I sat across from a woman named Deborah in a modest law office in downtown Savannah. Her desk was clean but lived in, with a jar of peppermint candies between us and 2 framed photos behind her. One of her dog, one of her daughter graduating law school. She didn't offer me coffee. I appreciated that. "I've seen a lot," she said, flipping through the folder I'd handed her. "But your documentation is one of the cleanest I've come across. Detailed, dated, and emotionally removed. That last part matters in court." I said nothing. She looked up over her glasses. "Do you want to try mediation first?" "No." "Okay," she said, tapping her pen once against the folder. "Let's file." She outlined the basics: civil fraud, misuse of jointly accessed accounts, and restitution. She didn't ask me to relive every detail. I think she could already see it in the paper trail, the pattern, the timing, the precision of betrayal. It took all of 15 minutes. After signing the final page, I leaned back in the chair and exhaled through my nose. It wasn't relief. Not yet. Just a shift. Deborah slid her copy into a manila envelope. "They're going to be surprised." I looked her in the eye. I'm counting on it. 2 days later, a certified envelope arrived at my mother's doorstep. Signed for by Lazaro. Hand-delivered. Documented. According to the case log, Maris read it first. Plaintiff. Akina Elling. Lazaro swore, loudly enough for the neighbor to hear. Clarabelle didn't raise her voice. She didn't even ask what it said. She walked into the dining room, picked up her phone, and began deleting every picture she had of me. Just like that. Like it was an app you uninstall. Not long after, I received a voicemail from her. No apology, just, "Call me if you want to fix this." I didn't return it. Instead, I opened a different drawer. One I hadn't touched in months. It held every receipt I'd ever kept out of instinct. Hospital discharge forms, Walgreens pharmacy notes with my signature, notes scribbled during calls with insurance reps, emails Clarabelle forwarded to me with subject lines like, "Please help again," and "One last time, I promise." There were over 60 of them. I scanned them in batches, labeling each PDF. I highlighted totals, circled key phrases. This wasn't vengeance. This was verification. I used to think keeping proof made me petty, but I realized it made me prepared. They'd mistaken my quiet for consent. That was their mistake. Later that week, I uploaded everything into a secured cloud folder. My lawyer smiled when I told her I'd organized it by category. "I knew you were sharp," she said, "but you're making me look lazy." I told her it was easy to track people when they never expect you to. That weekend, the ripple effect began. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years started texting me. Short messages, some cautious, some genuine. I didn't know. "Are you okay?" We always felt like something was off. I didn't respond to most of them. Not because I was bitter. I just wasn't building a support group. I was building a boundary. Then I saw Maris's Facebook post. White background, black cursive font. That vague emotional tone designed to stir sympathy without specifics. Family doesn't sue family. Some wounds never heal. But the betrayal still hurts. The comments were full of people validating her. I didn't comment. I didn't like it. I bookmarked it. Because I wasn't finished yet. I hadn't even opened the last folder. The folder stayed on my desk until spring. I didn't rush to open it. It wasn't waiting to hurt me, and I wasn't afraid of it anymore. We just sat with each other for a while, like two people who had already said all they needed to say. By June, it was over. The court awarded me a partial restitution, $68,000. Not everything I lost, but more than I expected. Enough to cover what mattered and let go of what didn't. The real victory wasn't the number. It was the silence that followed. A silence not built on fear or exclusion, but on completion. Nothing left to prove. Maris lost 2 of her biggest design clients within a month. One of them had seen the lawsuit filing online, public record. The other just felt like the timing wasn't right. Clarabelle had tried to smooth it over, called in a favor from a church friend who worked in PR. But a reputation built on image has nowhere to hide once the image cracks. Lazaro, it turns out, had been sloppy. A flagged audit exposed inconsistencies in one of his side businesses, which wasn't much more than invoice shuffling and tax loopholes. His credit lines froze. The next round of investment funding? Gone. None of this came from me. I didn't report anyone. I didn't leak anything. The truth, once pulled from silence, walks on its own. One afternoon in July, I checked the family group thread on instinct. Still gone, still blocked. Then I saw the email. From Clarabelle. Subject line. "We didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't open it. You don't open the door again just because someone finally knocks." Zadie and I moved that same week. Nothing grand. A small duplex outside downtown Savannah. It had creaky floors and a front porch too shallow for real chairs. But the sunlight hit just right in the mornings, and the kitchen felt like it belonged to someone honest. We painted Zadie's room together, lemon yellow. She picked it, said it felt like the color of starting over. There's a new drawing on our fridge now. 3 stick figures. Me, Zadie. A small cat she insists will adopt this fall. Above it, in purple crayon, Mom plus me, home. We go to the farmer's market every Saturday. Sometimes we run into people from the old church. Sometimes they say things like, "We miss seeing you around," or "Hope your mom's doing okay." I smile, keep walking. Zadie never asks about the lawsuit, not directly. But one morning, while we were both eating cereal on the porch, she looked up and said, "You think we'll ever go back there?" I didn't pretend to misunderstand. "No, baby, we're not meant to." She nodded like she already knew that. Later that day, I received a Zillow alert. Out of habit, I clicked. The old house was listed. For sale. The photos were bright and overly staged. Everything about it looked designed to forget. But the living room shot? The one that showed the wall where our family pictures used to hang? It was bare. The same space that once excluded me, now excluded everyone. That wall had been a declaration. Now it was drywall. I closed the listing. Didn't save it. Healing doesn't need reminders. Just room. Most nights now, I sit by the window while Zadie sleeps, and I watch the street stay quiet. Not lonely. Just quiet. It's taken me years to understand that freedom doesn't always roar. Sometimes it sits with you at the table you built yourself, in a house no one else claimed, and simply refuses to explain itself. They can say I was too cold, too distant, too much. But I know what I was. I was consistent. I was generous. And when I saw the damage, I didn't yell. I just stopped handing them the tools. You don't owe people the version of you that keeps their stories clean. You owe yourself a life that doesn't hurt just to stay in. I don't miss the seat they gave away. I'm building the table now. Hi, I'm Maura. I didn't think announcing my pregnancy at my husband's birthday party would change everything, but it did. You see, my sister-in-law, Darlie, handed me a plate of food that night. Everyone thought she was being sweet, thought she was trying to make things right. But what if I told you that plate wasn't just food, and I wasn't the one who ate it? And what happened next? It wasn't just betrayal. It was something far colder, calculated, covered in years of fake smiles and, "I'm just looking out for you." Everyone says family protects you. But what happens when they're the ones who sharpen the knife? Would you still call that family? Or just a threat with your last name? Because I didn't see it coming until someone else hit the ground. I still remember the way the sun hit the gravel driveway when we pulled up to Velda's house. It was the kind of early spring afternoon that should have felt warm and welcoming, but something in my chest already knew better. Lyle reached across the car to squeeze my hand like he always did, like it was second nature, like he knew this wasn't going to be easy for me. We stepped out together, but from the moment we crossed the threshold, I knew I wasn't part of the picture. There was a large board perched on an easel near the entrance, handwritten calligraphy, gold accents, names listed elegantly under a header. Family and close friends for Lyle's 39th. I read down the list, eyes catching every name. His coworkers, childhood buddies, even his ex's name was printed, bold and centered under special guests. I scanned twice before Lyle whispered, "Do you see your name?" I shook my head, jaw clenched. He leaned toward Velda as she came down the hallway with a tray of deviled eggs and asked, "Hey, Mom, why isn't Maura's name on the list?" She blinked, as if the question surprised her. "Oh, honey, I thought you were bringing her. So we just put +1. You know, to keep the layout balanced." To keep it balanced. That was her answer. Like my presence was a problem of symmetry. Inside, the laughter was easy. Darlie's voice rang out first. She was holding court near the kitchen, doling out air kisses, compliments, and faux modesty as though she were hosting. They fawned over her for putting the decorations together. Handmade banners, flower arrangements, even themed coasters. It looked more like Darlie's event than Lyle's, but no one seemed to question it. Not even him. I took a small plate of fruit and slipped onto a seat at the patio edge, hoping to go unnoticed just long enough to collect myself. When Velda made her way out to greet some neighbors, I tried to join the circle, offering a comment about the lemon bars on the dessert table. Velda smiled vaguely, then shifted the topic. Darlie really went all out. It's incredible, given what she's been through this year. That woman is a rock." Of course she was. Darlie always had a story that conveniently timed itself with anything I was about to say. I sat down again, back straighter this time. Lyle walked over, handed me a soda, then sat close. "You okay?" he asked under his breath. "I'm fine," I replied, then hesitated. "Did you notice my name's not on anything?" He didn't get a chance to respond. Velda stepped in, overhearing without apology. "Let it go, Maura. Darlie's still your elder. She's had to carry a lot more than you, and she's doing the best she can to hold this family together." I didn't say a word. Not because I agreed, but because I didn't trust myself to speak without saying too much. I walked inside a bit later to get water, needing a moment away from the noise. That's when I heard it. Darlie's voice, low but clear. "She means well, she just doesn't know how to be part of this family yet." I stood just behind the archway into the kitchen, unseen. She was talking to Velda's friend from church. The woman gave a polite chuckle and patted Darlie's shoulder, as if to say, "Bless her heart." I backed out slowly and returned to my seat like nothing happened. But everything inside me had shifted. My smile stayed fixed while I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the message threads with Velda. None of them mentioned my name. Not once. Every dinner invite, every birthday text, always addressed to Lyle and guest. I stared at those words until they blurred. That night, as the sun dipped behind the evergreens, Velda stood up and tapped her glass. "Let's hear from some of our loved ones," she called. "But first, Darlie, would you do the honors?" "Of course." Darlie glided up to the front of the crowd, wineglass lifted. "Before anyone says anything," she began, grinning, "I just want to say how proud I am to be here for Lyle. He deserves the world." I stood with my glass in hand, the words I had rehearsed all afternoon dissolving on my tongue. Darlie's voice carried through the backyard like it always did. Perfect pitch, calculated pauses, all the warmth of a practiced pageant queen. She talked about family being the backbone of everything, how life teaches you lessons when you least expect it, and then she landed the real punch, her miscarriage. "I was going to share this earlier," she said, her hand resting on her chest, "but I didn't want to make today about me. It's been 2 years since we lost our little one. I still light a candle every week, for healing, for hope." A few people murmured soft oh no's. One woman wiped her cheek. A man behind me whispered to his wife, "Did you know?" "I didn't know." Darlie smiled with perfect humility, like the suffering saint they all needed her to be. Meanwhile, I stood 2 steps from where I had just been ready to speak. My own words, my joy, our news, our moment, had been swallowed by a narrative no one dared to question. Lyle gave me a glance, as if to say, "Do you still want to?" I didn't answer. I nodded instead, mostly to myself, and stepped back into the crowd like I was never meant to stand out in the first place. After Darlie's toast, the music picked back up. Everyone returned to their drinks, to catching up, to laughing. Guests approached her one after another, offering words of support, some even apologizing for not knowing. She hugged them like they were old friends, as if the entire party was her living room, and the rest of us were her guests. I drifted toward the fruit table again. I didn't need more grapes. I needed distance. Lyle joined me a few minutes later, his expression soft but uncertain. He didn't touch his drink. "We can tell people later," he said. "Maybe over coffee, just us and your parents. Doesn't have to be a big announcement." He was trying to protect me. I knew that. But I also knew he had no idea what had just happened. "She knew," I said under my breath. "She timed it." He furrowed his brow, but didn't argue. The rest of the evening passed in fragments. People drifted in and out of conversations. Darlie never once looked my way, not even by accident. Velda made one more announcement about dessert and a photo slideshow put together by my amazing daughter, and I swallowed down whatever was left of my appetite. Back home, I folded the dress over the chair and sat on the edge of the bed. I didn't even change. I just sat. Lyle was brushing his teeth in the bathroom, whistling a bit like he always did when he was trying to pretend the day had gone well. Then came the silence. Too long. I looked up and saw him standing in the doorway, phone in hand, a strange look on his face. "What?" I asked. He showed me the screen. It was a text from an unknown number. No name, no icon, just gray bubbles. "Don't be fooled. That baby might not be yours." That's it. No context. No signature. I took the phone slowly, scanning the punctuation, the spacing, the way the period sat alone at the end. I'd seen that rhythm before, on dozens of texts, and only one person in my life punctuated like that. "She sent this," I said, handing it back. "Maura, you don't know that." I didn't respond. "Weirdos are everywhere," he added. "Let's just block the number." "We will," I said, but I already knew I wouldn't forget it. Or delete it. I got up, pulled my laptop from the drawer, and opened the folder I'd labeled 2 months ago, but never touched again. Darlie Pattern Log. Inside, I had saved screenshots, random comments, timestamps of strange coincidences over the years, photos Darlie had liked and unliked on my social pages, texts she'd sent Lyle that ended with, "Don't tell Maura I asked. She'll think it's weird." Small things. Things no one would care about. But now they weren't isolated. Now they were patterns. I added a new note to the top. Party, March 24th. Pregnancy announcement blocked by staged miscarriage story. Unknown text message received that night. Likely her. Lyle climbed into bed beside me, already half asleep. I stared at the ceiling fan as it turned. "She's not going to stop," I whispered to no one but myself. I moved the laptop closer and added one more note before closing the lid. Watch her more carefully. I didn't sleep much. My body was in bed, but my head stayed somewhere between Velda's dining table and the glow of my laptop. At some point after midnight, I shut the lid, left it on the nightstand, and slid under the blanket beside Lyle. He was already asleep, quiet, soft breathing, and I envied his ability to float above what had happened. By morning, the energy around the house was muted. Velda had planned a small family dinner to end the weekend, and nobody questioned it. I didn't either. It was her home, her event, her rules. At 6, the dining room was set like a magazine spread. Candles, polished silverware, floral napkin rings. Lyle and I arrived 5 minutes early, but Darlie was already seated across from where Velda had motioned for me to sit. Her smile was tighter than usual. I almost didn't recognize it as real. "Sit there," Velda said, pointing to the spot directly across from Darlie. "I figured you girls could use some time to reconnect." There it was again, her insistence on rewriting us into something we never were. We took our seats, conversations flowed, forks tapped plates, wine was poured. At some point during the second course, Darlie leaned forward and, in that syrupy tone she'd perfected, said, "Pregnancy's a wild ride, huh? Especially for someone like Maura. I mean, she's always been a little delicate." The comment hung in the air longer than it needed to. No one laughed. Not really. A few half-hearted chuckles, one cough. Then Velda, still buttering her roll, looked up and said with a breathy smile, "She's just joking. You know Darlie's sense of humor." Lyle said nothing. He kept eating. I stared at my salad, trying to remember the last time I'd felt like a full adult in that house. After dessert, I excused myself and walked out to the back patio. The air was colder than I expected, but I needed it. I needed something clean. Clear. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Nothing urgent. Just a reminder from my health app to log water intake. I opened it out of habit, checked a few tabs, then clicked into my patient portal. I noticed a login record I didn't recognize. 2 days before the party. The device ID wasn't mine, not Lyle's either. I checked his tablet, phone, even his work laptop later that evening. Nothing matched. And then, a sudden click in my head. Years ago, when Darlie thought she was pregnant, I helped her set up her first access to the same portal. She was nervous, didn't want to mess anything up. I'd logged in on my phone, let her browse, and never thought twice about it. She still had the credentials, or at least remembered how to get in. The access time matched the day before she brought up her miscarriage in that speech. It wasn't coincidence. It was prep work. After the dinner, we drove home mostly in silence. Lyle didn't ask why I hadn't said anything back at the table. Maybe he knew better. Or maybe he still thought this was just a personality clash between two sisters who needed space. When we got home, I poured myself a glass of water, took 2 slow sips, and opened my laptop again. The folder was waiting for me. Darlie pattern log. I added a new line. April 2nd. Unauthorized medical portal login. Likely Darlie. Motive. Sabotage. Manipulation of emotional tone at public event. I flipped through previous entries. The ones I had logged but never fully believed mattered. Gifts that didn't align with my dietary needs. Articles she sent Lyle about advanced maternal age. And the time she showed up uninvited to my first ultrasound appointment, saying she just happened to be nearby. I scrolled back up and added a header. Consistent undermining disguised as concern. I sat back in my chair and rubbed the side of my face. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't overthinking. It was structure. Later, lying in bed, I replayed the dinner in my mind. Darlie's tone, Velda's passive deflection, the way the others looked down at their plates, unwilling to challenge anything that might disturb the peace. They wouldn't see it, not yet. They won't see it until she turns on them, I said aloud. I picked up my phone and took a screenshot of the login history. Then, I sent it to myself in an email labeled, just in case. Because if she crossed another line, I wanted it to be her last. After we got home, I watched Lyle hang up his jacket and disappear into the kitchen to pour himself a glass of water. He asked if I wanted anything, and I told him no. I sat on the edge of our bed, phone still in hand, organizing the folder I had just finished uploading. Every detail, every digital breadcrumb, labeled and time-stamped. I wasn't scared, at least not in the way I used to be. It felt more like being inside a chess match I hadn't agreed to join, but now knew how to play. The next day passed in silence. No family texts, no follow-ups from Velda about the night before. Darlie, of course, posted 3 photos from the party, one of the cake, one with Velda in a side hug, and one of her standing alone near the gift table. No mention of me. Again. That evening, Velda invited us back for what she called a casual bite. I hesitated. Lyle said it might help normalize things. I said yes, but only because I needed to see her up close. We arrived a little past 5. The patio was set again with folding chairs, soft music, finger food laid out like always, shrimp cocktail, fruit skewers, and little spinach puffs I used to love before pregnancy made the smell unbearable. The sun dipped slowly over the fence, casting that long golden hour glow that made everything seem more peaceful than it deserved to be. Darlie approached with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She held a small plate, balanced carefully, like it was something important. "This one's for you," she said gently. "No garlic. I made sure this time." Her voice had that same rehearsed warmth, the same softness she used when telling Velda about her imaginary promotion last year. She placed the plate in my hands, patted my wrist. I didn't say much, just nodded and walked toward one of the folding tables, setting the plate down beside a half-empty glass of lemonade I hadn't touched. I didn't eat. I didn't plan to. From across the yard, I caught her watching me. Her glance wasn't long, just enough to check if the plate had moved. I looked away before she saw that I saw. "Velda called everyone to gather for a photo. Just a quick shot before it gets too dark," she said. I left the plate exactly where it sat, untouched. After the flash, I wandered back to my table. It was gone. I scanned the tables, the chairs, the counter by the kitchen. Nowhere. So I slipped inside, took the hallway toward the kitchen. There, next to the sink, was a trash bag not fully tied. The plate was in it, wrapped in a new napkin, completely untouched. Someone had taken it and tossed it. I didn't need to ask who. On the drive home, Lyle talked about Velda's garden, how he was impressed she managed to keep the succulents alive after that frost last month. I nodded occasionally, giving him space to talk while my mind rolled back over the timeline. When we got home, I asked Lyle casually, "Hey, can you check the backyard camera for a sec? I thought I saw something weird last night." He was in the middle of taking off his shoes, but shrugged and grabbed the tablet. A few taps later, he frowned. "That's weird. The footage from 5:42 to 5:59 is just blank, like static." I didn't react right away. I already knew what he'd find. That window was exactly when Darlie had handed me the plate. I made a new entry in my log. April 3rd, power flicker aligned with food delivery. Camera gap, 17 minutes. Darlie present. I didn't write it in anger. I wrote it like a technician checking a circuit. This was no longer emotional. It was procedural. At bedtime, while Lyle brushed his teeth and flipped through the news on his phone, I sat on my side of the bed and uploaded a new batch of photos and notes to the cloud. I labeled the new folder, "Just in case. Truth always surfaces." I had just closed my laptop when Lyle came in and sat next to me, rubbing his face. "I think your mom meant well tonight," he said. I looked at him, then looked back at my phone. I didn't answer. Instead, I tapped through my photos, checked that everything was backed up, and then turned off the screen. Because tomorrow would come, and I had a feeling someone else was about to pay the price for a plate that never should have been served. The next morning came like any other. Quiet, gray, still. Lyle had already left to pick up bagels for Velda's follow-up brunch, some awkward attempt at a family cool-down. I stayed back to finish my tea and give myself a moment. I kept thinking about the plate Darlie had handed me the night before. The way she looked at it, the way it vanished, and how none of it sat right, not even in my stomach. By noon, we were back at Velda's backyard. It was almost identical to the party setup: folding chairs, plastic tablecloths, trays of food under mesh covers. But there was something off in the air, like the party smiles from last night were now painted on and drying too fast in the sun. I kept my distance from the buffet. I knew Velda would notice, so I made sure to carry a glass of water and a napkin just to keep my hands busy. It didn't take long before Darlie approached, once again holding a plate. Another special one. "Hey," she said casually. "I made sure this one's safe. No garlic, no citrus, all good." She said it with such ease, as if last night had never happened. "I'm not hungry," I replied, flat. "Oh, I get it. Pregnancy waves, right?" She smiled, leaned in. "But don't let this go to waste. Ronan'll eat anything." And just like that, she turned, held the plate out toward her husband across the lawn, and called out, "Try this one, babe." Ronan looked up, wiped his hands on a napkin, and took it from her with a tired grin. "What's in it?" he asked, already lifting the fork. "Just lasagna," she said, voice soft. "The one Maura didn't want." He didn't pause, just started eating like it was nothing. I stood completely still, hand frozen around my glass. The words, "the one Maura didn't want," bounced around my head like a ball in an empty room. 10 minutes passed. Then came the shift. Ronan staggered forward, hand clutched at his side. His face went pale, lips almost bluish. At first, I thought maybe it was the heat, but then I saw him bend forward, violent retching onto the grass. Velda screamed, "Call someone! Call 911!" Lyle ran over, trying to hold Ronan upright. He was shaking now, sweating through his shirt, gasping between gags. Darlie fell beside him, wailing, "What's happening? What's wrong with him?" She looked around wildly, like she didn't know who to blame. I didn't move. I stayed by the edge of the patio, staring, because I knew exactly what he had eaten. It was the plate meant for me. But I said nothing, not yet. The ambulance came quicker than expected. Maybe because Velda had called someone higher up at the clinic she volunteers at, or maybe it was just luck. They loaded Ronan into the back, and Darlie cried the whole time, fingers trembling, voice shaking. Velda rode with Lyle in the car behind the ambulance. I stayed. Darlie was still on the porch when everyone else had cleared. Her mascara had streaked, her cheeks blotchy. She held a tissue to her mouth like it was keeping her together. When our eyes finally met, she didn't say anything at first. Then, quietly, "What did you give him?" It hit me like a slap. I walked closer, slow, deliberate. "I didn't touch anything. That plate? You gave it to me. I left it. He picked it up when I didn't." She didn't blink, didn't breathe, just stared at me like I had upended her entire script. "No one's going to believe that," she said finally, barely audible. "Maybe not," I said. "But the camera won't lie." "Oh, wait. Never mind. It glitched again, didn't it?" Her lip twitched, just a little. "Be careful," she murmured, more like a warning to herself than a threat to me. That night, back in my office, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I sat with my laptop and renamed the folder. Darlie pattern log, active attempt, document everything. I rewrote the timeline, from the message to the missing footage, from the untouched plate to the person who ended up in the ER. I closed the file and leaned back. "I was supposed to be the one in that ambulance," I whispered. Then I added one last note. She didn't panic because someone got hurt. She panicked because it wasn't me. The morning after Ronan was taken to the hospital, the sky hung low and quiet. There was no breeze, no birdsong, just that suffocating stillness that comes after something breaks but hasn't yet fallen apart completely. I had just poured my second cup of coffee when Lyle walked into the kitchen, phone pressed to his ear. He held up one finger, signaling I should wait. I leaned against the counter. "She wants us over at 2, he said after hanging up. "Family meeting." "Velda?" I asked. He nodded. "She says it's about what happened yesterday." Of course it was. I didn't ask who else was invited. I already knew Darlie would be there. She wouldn't miss a stage, not one like this. And Velda wouldn't dare hold court without her star pupil sitting front and center. By 1:40, we were pulling up to the house again. The same house where Darlie's voice echoed like wallpaper. The same porch where she cried crocodile tears less than 24 hours ago. Velda greeted us at the door like nothing had happened. Her tone was calm but clipped. I scanned the room. Ronan wasn't there, of course, still in recovery. But Darlie was. She sat on the edge of the couch, wearing light blue with sleeves that fluttered like she'd just stepped off a yoga retreat. Her eyes were red. Mascara had been reapplied. Her hair pulled back with 2 gentle strands loose at the sides. Grief costume, complete. As soon as we sat down, she spoke. No one prompted her. "I almost lost my husband," she said, her voice breaking just enough. "I don't know how this happened, how food at our own party could do that. I can't sleep thinking about it." Not once did she say Ronan's name. Not once did she say she was sorry. I watched the way Velda nodded along, arms crossed but not defensive, more protective. No one said my name either, but the tension in the room had it circling like smoke. I let her talk. Let the performance unfold, line by line, like a script she'd memorized and tested in front of a mirror. And then I spoke. "The plate Ronan ate from was meant for me." Velda's mouth parted slightly, but she said nothing. "I didn't eat it. He picked it up after I left it behind." Darlie looked right at me. Her face didn't falter, but her hands trembled just slightly, enough to catch the light. "So now I'm being accused?" she said, voice rising. "After everything I've done for this family? For you?" Velda shifted in her seat, preparing to intervene, but Lyle beat her to it. "It's a valid question, Mom," he said firmly. Silence. I felt the axes of the room turn. Not much, but just enough. And then, from the side of the room, a voice I didn't expect. I probably shouldn't say anything, but I think I have to. It was Inez, the catering assistant, Velda's neighbor's niece. She'd been quiet this whole time, sitting in a side chair, scrolling on her phone. I had barely noticed her. Inez looked up, meeting Velda's eyes first, then Darley's, then mine. When we were setting up the trays, Mrs. Darley asked me not to serve one of the dishes. She said it was for her sister. Just for her. That no one else should touch it. Velda stiffened. Darley's face drained. Just a little. I kept my gaze steady, didn't flinch. No one yelled, no one screamed. There wasn't a dramatic collapse or wailing denial. Just silence. Long and brittle. It was the kind of silence you only hear when something false starts to fall apart. Darley opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Velda finally stood up, smoothing the sides of her blouse. "I think that's enough for now," she said. "Thank you, Inez." We all began to rise. Darley didn't look at me. She looked at the floor. When Lyle and I got back in the car, he didn't turn the ignition right away. He stared straight ahead and finally said, "Do you think she did it on purpose?" I looked out the window for a long time before I replied. "I think she wanted to hurt me," I said. "She just didn't care who paid the price." That night, while Lyle slept, I opened the active attempt folder on my laptop and created a new subfolder. Next. Proof. Because now it wasn't just about me, and the next proof would come from a place she didn't know was watching her. The next morning, I was halfway through my first coffee when my phone buzzed with a text from Janelle, our neighbor. She lived 2 doors down, the kind of neighbor who always had eyes on the street, but never overstepped. Her message was short. "Hey Maura, weird question. Do you want the security footage from Saturday night? Our camera points over your fence. Motion got triggered a few times. Thought you might want to look." I sat back in my chair, my mug still in my hand. My heart didn't race, but something deeper inside shifted. I replied, kept it light. "Sure, appreciate it." A few minutes later, she sent me a short video clip and a message. Might be nothing, but figured I'd offer. I downloaded it, plugged in my headphones, and hit play. At first, it was just grainy backyard footage. The corner of our fence, a slice of Velda's patio visible through a break in the trees. It was twilight. The catering tables had just been set. People mingled in and out of frame until I saw her. Darley. She crouched behind the table, almost blocked from view. Her purse was tucked between 2 food warmers. I watched her look around, pull something small and shiny from her bag, and reach toward one of the trays. The movement was quick, practiced. Then she stood, brushed her hands on her dress, and walked back into the frame like nothing had happened. I paused it. My hand gripped the side of the laptop. I took a screenshot and saved it. That night, after dinner, I sat Lyle down at the table. I pulled out the laptop and said only one word. "Watch." He did. In silence. When the clip ended, he didn't ask questions. He didn't try to rationalize it or tell me it might not mean what I thought. He just said, "She knew that wasn't for Ronan. She just didn't stop him." I nodded, already saving the clip into my folder. I renamed it, Exhibit 1, External Source. This wasn't paranoia anymore. This wasn't even suspicion. This was visible. The next morning, I texted Velda, asking if I could check in on Ronan. She responded within minutes. "He's still weak, but he asked for you." It surprised me. I hadn't expected him to ask for me. That afternoon, I stopped by the hospital. I brought a box of chamomile tea bags, the kind he liked. Velda had just stepped out for a coffee break, so it was just us. He looked older in the bed, not sick, but smaller somehow, like his body had let go of whatever illusion it had been trying to maintain. "Hey," he said softly, "I didn't think you'd come." I sat down in the chair beside him. "You asked for me." He smiled faintly. We were quiet for a few minutes. I unpacked the tea and placed it on the table. Then he said, "Can I tell you something?" I haven't told anyone. I nodded. Before I passed out, he said slowly, she bent over me. She didn't think I was listening. She said, "It wasn't supposed to be you." His voice cracked a little, and she looked terrified, not because I was hurt, because she messed it up. I stayed quiet, let him finish. She sounded like someone who'd just broken her own rules. Did anyone else hear? I asked. He shook his head. Just me. I touched his hand briefly. That's enough. Later that night, back at home, I opened my laptop and began putting it all together. Not as notes this time, but as a structured file, a digital presentation. A single document with everything. Exhibit 1. Janelle's camera footage. Exhibit 2. Medical portal login logs. Exhibit 3. Inez's statement. Exhibit 4. Ronan's words, typed as he said them, with time, date, and witness listed as me. I uploaded everything into a shared folder and sent it privately to my friend Jenna, who happened to be a family lawyer in Lane County. No drama, no caption, just the link and one sentence. Please keep this safe. My final act of the evening was drafting a group message to the family. We need a meeting. Everyone. No exceptions. There's something you all need to see. I didn't send it right away. I stared at it for a while. Then, I added a title to the top of the document, The Truth You Ignored. And I clicked send. Because when you finally show the truth, it has to be in front of everyone who looked away. I stood in the hallway, just outside the living room, while the digital projector warmed up. The low whir of the fan inside it matched the sound in my chest. Steady, focused, no panic left. Through the doorway, I could see Lyle setting out glasses of water on the coffee table, Ronan leaning against the armrest of the couch, still pale but alert. The others hadn't arrived yet, but they would. I checked the time, 5:58 p.m. One by one they filed in. Velda first, of course. Her silver hair was pinned up higher than usual, and she carried a Tupperware container of lemon cookies like that would sweeten whatever was coming. Then Darlie entered. Alone. She wore beige, no jewelry, no dramatic makeup this time. Just soft tones and wary eyes. Like a woman attending her own sentencing without knowing what the charge was yet. At exactly 6, I stepped into the room. "Thanks for coming," I said. "Please have a seat." No one spoke. I walked to the front of the room and stood beside the screen. It projected the title I had typed the night before in large, bold letters. The Truth You Ignored. "This won't take long," I began, "but it will be clear." I clicked the remote. First slide, Inez's signed statement. Her words, typed and time-stamped, next to a photo of her at the catering station. She told me not to let anyone touch that tray, the quote read. Said it was just for her sister. Next slide, medical portal access logs. Highlighted lines showed access from an unregistered device days before the incident. Dates, times, IP addresses. Third slide, the grainy footage from Janelle's camera. Darlie crouched behind the food tables, hand in her purse. Reaching. Lyle stared at the screen. Velda shifted in her chair. Darlie didn't flinch. Her eyes stayed glued to the wall behind me, unfocused. Then came Ronan's quote, typed in the center of a white background. "It wasn't supposed to be you." Silence followed. And finally, I opened the last file. A PDF. Hospital records. Toxicology results from Ronan's blood work. Listed clearly among the agents detected. A compound known to induce uterine contractions. Dangerous for early pregnancies, especially those marked high risk in medical files. Velda placed her hand over her mouth. Lyle looked down at his lap, clenched fists resting on his knees. Ronan didn't blink. He watched Darlie. And she finally spoke. "It wasn't meant to hurt anyone," she said quietly. "It was just to scare her, to get her to think." She stood up, voice rising with every word. "You all treat her like she's this perfect, innocent thing, like she didn't come in here and take over everything, I was here first. I've carried this family. I planned every birthday, every baby shower, every holiday. And what does she get? A banner? A baby? All the attention. You tried to poison your sister, Lyle said, his voice like gravel. This isn't about attention anymore. Darlie's hands trembled. It was one time, one thing. It went too far. But Ronan, he wasn't supposed to. You didn't mean for me to eat it, Ronan cut in, voice flat. But you meant for someone to. That landed hard. Velda finally stood. Stop talking, Darlie, she said. Just stop. No, I said calmly. Let her say it. Let them all hear. And Darlie broke. Not the theatrical, mascara-smudged crying she had perfected over the years, but the kind of unraveling that doesn't come with noise. Her shoulders slumped. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came. She sat back down. I stepped forward, took a breath. I've already sent everything to the police, I said, scanning each face. There's nothing more to discuss here. What happens next isn't mine to decide. Then I turned to Velda, the woman who had smiled through every slight, the one who excused every insult from Darlie with a chuckle and the same tired line. She's your sister. I'm not asking you to pick sides, I said, but I am telling you where I stand. And for the first time in years, no one interrupted me when I finished speaking. 2 weeks later, I sat in the back row of courtroom 3B, hands folded in my lap, the smell of stale coffee and paper filling the space around us. Lyle was beside me, silent, his thumb brushing mine like a quiet metronome. Across the aisle, Ronan sat at the plaintiff's table, still pale, still recovering, but upright and present. Beside him was his attorney. On the opposite side, Darlie sat with a public defender she hadn't spoken 2 words to since she walked in. She looked smaller in the courtroom light. Not physically, she still had that straight posture and tight jaw, but smaller in presence. She didn't command the room anymore, not like she used to. The judge, a tall woman with clipped sentences and zero tolerance for dramatics, cleared her throat and began. This is case number 2371C, Ronan Fields versus Darlie Fields. Petitioner seeks immediate dissolution of marriage on grounds of endangerment. There were no objections, no counter-arguments, just a nod from Darlie's lawyer and a hushed, "We accept." No fireworks, no gasps, just quiet, just truth. Finally, in a space where no one could talk over it. Outside the courtroom, Velda stood by the water fountain, wiping her face with the corner of a tissue she'd shredded over the past hour. She didn't look at me. I didn't expect her to. I didn't offer comfort, not out of bitterness, just certainty. The kind of certainty that no longer needs to explain itself. The sentencing came 2 days later. Darlie wouldn't serve prison time. The DA didn't file attempted murder. Too hard to prove intent with enough certainty. But reckless endangerment, tampering with food, emotional cruelty with corroborated witness statements, those stuck. The judge gave her 18 months in a local correctional center, 3 years of probation, and mandatory psychological evaluation sessions. Twice a week, minimum. People in our neighborhood whispered. Some said it was harsh. Others said it wasn't enough. I said nothing. The week after sentencing, Velda dropped off a bundle of baby clothes on our porch. No note, just a grocery bag tied in a loose knot, with a pair of tiny white booties sitting right on top. I left it there until the morning rain came and soaked through the paper tags. Then I brought it in and put it in a bin we'd already filled from our own shopping. A month later, I was standing in the nursery, holding my daughter against my chest. Her breathing was soft, rhythmic, her skin warm and perfect against mine. Lyle came in quietly, holding a photo frame. "Thought you'd want this on the dresser," he said, setting it down. It was the 3 of us, him, me, and Nate. No grandparents, no aunts, just us. Nate peeked into the room a few minutes later, holding something in his hand, a small paper star cut from a cereal box. "I made this for her," he said, "so she always knows someone's looking out for her." I kissed the top of his head, took the star, and gently tucked it next to the baby's blanket. It didn't erase the past, but it did remind me that the past didn't get to run things anymore. Sometimes healing doesn't come with fanfare. Sometimes it's just a quiet morning, a steady breath, and a choice to stay. Weeks passed. The house stayed quiet. We kept our circle small. I answered questions when friends asked, but never gave more than I needed to. Then, one afternoon, I saw Velda standing across the street. She wasn't walking her dog or bringing in groceries. She was just standing, looking. She noticed me through the window. We didn't wave. We didn't smile. But she didn't look away either. That was enough. Later that evening, Lyle came into the living room with his phone in hand. "Ronan sent a message," he said. "He asked me to tell you thank you for not staying silent." I nodded. That night, as I sat at the kitchen table, tea cooling beside me, I opened my laptop and pulled up the folder. Not to edit it, not to add more evidence, just to remind myself I hadn't imagined any of it. It all happened. And I stood up anyway. I'm not angry anymore, but I'll never be naive again. Because justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the silence that finally stays quiet because it no longer needs to explain itself. Sometimes surviving is the quietest way to win.